Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this part of our delivery board meeting. The second part is the part that is obviously open to the public, and I'm glad you're able to watch this either as a recorded piece or as a live piece. Earlier on, we've been through the closed session where we have discussed some issues, and maybe some of them or bits of them might come up during the open section as well. So to start off, I'll just give an update from myself. The key areas to just update you on around the funding formula review. At the moment, I actually raised again at a meeting yesterday with the policing minister and a gentleman who is leading on the funding formula review for the Home Office, and the work is still ongoing. I am informed that by the end of this year, the recommendations will be made to the Home Office, and then it will be down to the government to come to a conclusion as to what they choose to do. Of course, we have no idea what the outcome will be, and the Chief Constable is part of I believe, a steering committee of some kind, a technical committee where the input around Bedfordshire's need is being made very, very powerfully, and at a political level, I continue to engage with ministers at every opportunity that I get to raise the issue that we have in Bedfordshire and why this funding formula needs to be addressed as soon as possible. Secondly, will be around the commissioning review. I just wanted to reassure all of the partners who have been commissioned in the past or who have applied for commissioning for 22-23. What we have done is to have a pause to the commission, to some elements of the commissioning process, not a stop to it, because I feel very strongly that we need to have a process in place that delivers value for many, and that is also seen to be able to stand up to any kind of scrutiny by the public. And one thing I'm also considering as part of the review of the current commissioning process is how we can actually deliver a multi-year funding settlement to partners rather than at the moment where they're having to bid for commission services every single year. I don't think that's actually an efficient way to do things. So hopefully when we get the finalized position and people are informed of the commissioning for 22-23, hopefully in around February or March time, they'll be given a process where they know that they will be having a 3-year funding settlement as such. Last week, Friday, I had a meeting with all the MPs in the county were invited to a quarterly catch up with me so we can discuss the precept, the police and crime plan, or any other issues that they want to raise with me for their areas. Three members of parliament turned up, and all of them were able to raise issues about their own constituencies. So that was quite positive. And I also wanted to just use this opportunity to thank the member of parliament for Bedford and Kempston for raising in parliament the issue of the funding formula as well during our questions to the policing minister. The survey deadline is today. I'm really pleased with the number of those who are engaging with this survey and sharing their views with us. So the numbers have been really, really positive in terms of those who have who have taken part in the survey so far. So deadline is 5 p.m. today. If you have not taken part in the survey yet, please use the link that we provided to share your views about this survey. Now we're going to move to agenda item number 9.2, which will be a verbal update from DCC Trevor Rodenhurst.
Thanks, Commissioner. Yes, this update's just on the activity we're doing to perhaps approach this meeting in the future so that we can, if you like, timetable the meeting throughout the course of next year against your police and crime plan priorities. So I've just been chairing a small task and finish group within the force where we've essentially mapped all of the force activity that's going on against your police and crime plan. That work's progressed. At the moment, we're at the stage where it's actually quite a large product and we're just refining it. So that it can make it really sort of usable for that purpose. So my proposal is that by March, I'd come to this meeting, outline how we'd sort of plan to kind of go through next year, in terms, so we can almost have a thematic approach to these meetings against your police and crime plan, if you find that helpful.
Oh, I think that would be really helpful. I mean, in terms of just being able to more clearly see how activities line up with the police and crime plan and what the public really expect from the force. I think that would be really helpful. And I think the police and crime panel would really welcome that as well, because it just makes for easier tracking.
Yeah. So if you're happy with those timescales, that's what we'll work to. So that we start
March. So
if we start, present it to you in March with a view that we move to that kind of thematic agenda for the new financial year.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's good. I'm happy with that. Brilliant. Moving on to 10.1 on community policing model and establishments. Mr. Basra? Oh, no, sorry, no, Phil. Sorry, Mr. Wells. Phil.
This one's me. So thanks, Chair. This report's really in two parts. The first part is just to bring you up to speed of where we are in terms of policing the community hubs. And the second part is just to give you a bit of good practice that's happened across the force. And as you know, we do it local authority based area each time, and this time it's Central Beds. So I'll give you a couple of examples of some work that the community teams have carried out in Central Beds. But in terms of the model itself, as you're aware, we have our community hubs is based on having 67 PCs in the model and 47 PCSOs. You'll also be aware that in previous meetings, we've reported relatively large vacancies against those numbers. As at this moment in time, so January, we have 65 PCs in post against that 67. So just 2 vacancies, which we are proactively filling. And we have 49 PCSOs against a budget of 47. So we're 2 over on the PCSOs. So whilst we're 2 down on PCs, we're 2 up on PCSOs. So we're in a really good position. And we know that there are more officers now in the force wanting to go into community policing. And we also have a PCSO intake coming in during February or March, which will further increase those numbers and they will go into community policing. So we'll be in a really good position continuing throughout, hopefully, 22 calendar year. Then in terms of the activity that the teams provide, I'll give you a couple of examples. Firstly, in South Central. So this one was in September 2021, where we received concerns around drugs in a local community, and we focused a bit of action from our community policing team around some of that intelligence. And what so a location was identified in Dunstable, where the concern was raised by the local community. We deployed the South Central community team, and they executed a warrant, gaining entry rapidly to secure and preserve evidence and detain individuals within the property. As part of that investigation, we seized criminal property seizures, including ½ kilo of cocaine, £40,000 worth of cash bundles, scales and MDMA tablets. And a male was subsequently charged with a primary offence of possessing Class A with intent to supply. So that was a bit of work from the South Central team in Dunstable. Then in North Central, an operation called Op Evan was to target specific drugs predominantly in the Shefford area. This was instigated following numerous concerns and complaints from members of the public regarding drug dealing. This ran alongside the focus on the Shefford drugs gangs and associated criminality linked into our guns and gangs team, which is Op Bosun, as you'll be aware. A review of the intelligence and information and resources to target locations, utilising PCSOs and their local knowledge, and there was significant success in the operation. So police officers in plain clothes maximised the impact of the success of the operation, deployed in 2 teams in hotspot locations simultaneously. Officers from Op Bosun were interspersed into that, enabling a deeper understanding of the issue. We ran that operation for a week. at different times in locations across that central area in Shefford, and had a clear focus on, based on the intelligence we've got, to add the element of surprise and a good distraction tactic, which we hadn't previously done in that Shefford area. The operation resulted in arrest for cannabis possession. A concealed hide was located and a large quantity of cannabis was located. The success was shared with the wider community, not only through social media accounts, but also through the priority setting meetings. We were able to feed back to the local community that the work had been done on this issue. So they were two examples of good work by the community teams in that central area, Chair. And if there's any further you want, then obviously we can provide you some further examples if you need them. And Sean's put his hand up.
Yeah. Before I come to you, Sean, I want to just ask, as part of the communication of these, are the members of Parliament being kept abreast of the outcomes of some of these activities in their constituencies?
Not on individual basis. We have regular meetings with the members of Parliament once every month where we update them on general activity, and obviously they follow the social media updates for their local areas as well, so they should pick that up through there.
Because I was just wondering if, because obviously from this report you just shared, Phil, that the outcomes of Evan in this particular instance in Shefford was circulated widely around on social media and things, which I've got to commend the community team for the fantastic use of social media lately, and the comms teams as well from the force for the excellent job they're doing in just keeping the public aware of some of the activities that the force are performing and the outcomes as well. Really excellent way to keep the public informed of what's going on. I was just wondering if those kind of information that's shared with CSPs, community safety partnerships, if those are shared with the MPs as well.
I don't think they are directly, Festus, but as the Chief says, we can mostly pick that up as part of our engagement with them.
Okay, if not, then I think it's something I'm sure they'll be very happy to get the extra information from Bedfordshire Police. Sean?
Thank you again. Just to add some more weight in terms of the strength and depth of our community policing teams. Our community policing teams obviously lead on crime prevention. And as you'll know, as part of the National Crime and Policing measures, there is a priority area to reduce neighbourhood crime, which includes burglary, robbery, theft of vehicle crime, theft from person. And year to date, we've seen reductions compared to last year in all of those four areas of crime. And in particular, you may ask, how are we using our influx and uplift of officers to help target these crime reduction priorities? And each of our student officers, as well as our dedicated Police Now cohorts, undertake crime prevention projects in local areas. And I can just give you two examples of the excellent work that they have got in place and have done. So one of those is has managed to broker a partnership with National Tyres, and we're looking to put some anti-theft marking on over 1,000 cars across the county to help tackle the issue of catalytic converter theft. And the other one is another officer's engaged in a pilot scheme working with National Monitoring. And this helps to target some of our most high-risk victims and provide high-tech safeguarding solutions, including alarms, camera systems, and GPS trackers. And so far, we've got 20 people across Bedfordshire who have benefited from this system. And we've had some excellent feedback in terms of testimonials in how it's made them feel so much safer and be able to get back to some of the activity that they've loved to do previously, able to feel safe and go out and about.
Okay, thanks for that, Sean. And in what I think has been really positive so far, which I'm not sure you can tell me if how this was happening beforehand, is that we've got this pipeline of officers now who want to go into community. Why do you think that is happening?
I would say that first and foremost, it's because of the great testimonials that we get back from our public. and the feedback that we get from the community teams that are out and about in their local areas.
Gary, you're going to come in.
Yeah, I mean, what we've tried to focus on doing is delivering the College of Policing's 7 strands of good neighbourhood policing, which gives you a very highly empowered group of officers who would then have the ability to be very proactive and focus on the areas of business that matter most to the public and to us as cops, because they get to intervene and lock up criminals and then do the good things and solve problems. So the approach that we've adopted here means that generates a very positive feeling with our community teams, and that becomes something what we aspire to, which is it becomes a career option of choice for people. So it's great that we've got people wanting to do that and deliver really positively for the public. And the fact that we actually ring fence them and don't abstract them unnecessarily to do other things means they can deliver exactly what they think they're joining for. So hence it's becoming very popular as a career choice, which is exactly what we want it to be.
And I want to just thank you as a leadership team for your commitment to this area of the business, as you are to other areas of the business. And obviously you knew this is a priority area from the public and with the policing crime plan as well. So I'm glad that you gave your word and you are keeping your word in terms of the abstraction, which then allows these officers to be able to be dedicated and focused to knowing their area and dealing and owning issues and resolving them in their area as well. One thing I wanted to just mention as well is I was in a meeting yesterday with one of the community safety teams for, I think, Houghton Regis, and the community sergeant there, I think his name was Luke, I can't remember, I think so anyway, was talking about the figures of patrol hours that the community team in his patch had carried out. Now, this is not something that you need to respond to for this particular meeting, and I just wondered if it is possible to kind of keep track of patrol hours. I don't know how we do that, but someone is doing it, and it was quite an impressive figure to see what it used to be to what it is now. I don't know if we have that force-wide.
Well, some of that's the level of initiative that we've got with some of our brilliant community officers who've got the permission to go and do things like that. I mean, if there's a simple way of doing it, what I don't want people sat behind computers filling out spreadsheets when they should be solving problems. But we'll link in with Luke and see if he's got an innovative way of doing it. I know we spoke at probably the first meeting around how we can actively demonstrate and track the neighbourhood policing resources. And whilst we've had some technical difficulty moving towards a resolution, we've managed to move that on a little bit, which I'll let Phil fill you in on.
Okay, Phil?
Yeah, so we're in a position whereby we think the technical solution works. So we've overcome the difficulties of the technical solution. We're just now working on how that data can be presented. So I'm hoping in the next week or two, we can provide you with something that actually you can start looking at and start seeing how you want to use and refine.
Yeah, I mean, as long as obviously I would imagine it's going to be a retrospective report rather than because we certainly don't want people knowing where the officers are at any particular time, so we wouldn't want to do that. But I think it would just be reassuring for the public to know that, you know, cops are active in their communities and they are on foot patrols and they are being visible. But, you know, the social media is a real, I mean, I'm really enjoying seeing the impact that the community teams are having on the ground at the moment. So that's fantastic. Okay, so we move on to item number 11 on the agenda. Again, Phil, on recruitment and retention. I think we're doing that next month, isn't it? Next month. Okay, that's fine. So we'll move on to number 12 then, with the budget. Phil? Okay.
Thanks, Chair. I appreciate that we've had a couple of discussions on this and there is a report to this, but there will be people listening that won't have seen either of those. So I'll go into a little bit of detail so people can understand what the discussion relates to. So the provisional settlement for Bedfordshire Police was received on the 16th of December 2021. We are expecting a final settlement, but we expect that to be late January. Usually comes out about the 31st of January. But it's unlikely that it will be very different or any difference to what we've had as a provisional settlement. So the report that you have in front of you is mostly based on the best information that we'll have at the time that you go to the police and crime panel. There's a couple of elements that are still outstanding, but these are specific grants around counter-terrorism and special branch, and it is usual that they are later than the settlement and they don't have any impact on the budget paper that's been presented to you today. The settlement itself provided for an increase into core grant, which is the police grant that we received direct from the Home Office. It was an increase of £4 million between 22-23 and 21-22, but that mainly covers the cost of national insurance, which was a national increase, and the cost of the extra officers relating to the government's 20,000 police uplift programme. In addition to this, as you'll be aware, PCCs have been given the ability to increase council tax by £10 at a Band D average, and I think it's just worth highlighting that if you choose to increase that by £10, that doesn't mean everybody pays £10. Any household that is lower than a Band D will pay less than £10, and any household that's higher than a Band D will pay greater than £10. And I'll make sure that you have the information available for the panel so you can discuss that through. If you choose to take the option of increasing precept by or council tax by £10, that will provide a further level of income of £3.9 million into the organisation compared to 21-22. This includes a level of funding that's based on a recovering tax base. What that means is that during COVID, the tax base around council tax reduced, and we've seen it increase in 22-23 by 3.39%, which actually in its own right provides about £1.7 million worth of funding. And therefore your £10 precept, if you chose to do that, provides a further 2.25 million. In addition to that, again, as a result of the COVID impact and the pandemic impact, we have seen a one-off increase in collection fund between 21-22 and 22-23 of just shy of £750,000. We do think that's a one-off. We do think we'll receive a surplus in future years, but not at that level. Overall, therefore, if you choose as a PCC to increase a precept by £10, the level of funding increase between 21-22 and 22-23 will be approximately £8.6 million. However, just in that context, it's worth highlighting that the overall budget for Bedfordshire is currently averaging about 125 million over the last 10 years. And in that time, the force has had to find £45 million worth of savings, so an average of £4.5 million worth of savings each year. And during that time, we've seen our officer numbers drop from 1,264 to 1,067 at its lowest. And since 2017-18, we've seen that gradually being built back up to 1,351 officers. And as I talk about later, this financial year 22-23, we envisage that growing by a further 72. But in terms of that context, what it has meant is that the force has taken all of the savings it can through pay and non-pay reductions, and therefore any further reductions it makes will likely be a reduction in service rather than savings themselves. To allow us to understand that, we run what's called a priority-based budgeting process within the force, and that looks at every single service we provide. It looks at the current service level, a lower service level and a higher service level, just so we're fully sighted on if we have to make reductions or we've got the ability to invest, where those reductions in investments would come from. And it's also worth highlighting that the force budget is comprised 80% of pay and 20% of non-pay. And recognising that the uplift programme is increasing officers, any savings are likely just to come from that 20% of non-pay, which the force over austerity has tried to reduce to the lowest amount it can. In terms of expenditure that the force needs to incur against that £8.6 million worth of funding, it has identified a further £0.6 million worth of savings, but there are additional costs that the force have to incur just to carry on providing the same level of service. These are things such as pay award for the police officers and police staff, which is nationally set, and we don't know what the outcome of that will be until after the budget has been set. But we are estimating that it will be 3% for police officers and police staff. Inflation, we apply a level of inflation across all of our areas, whether that be fuel, whether that be energy costs, or whether that be contractual costs. So that is built into our budget. We've got the national insurance increase, which was nationally mandated. We've got the police officer pay cost resulting from the National Uplift Programme. We've got what's called incremental increases in officer and staff pay, which is nationally set pay scales. Officers and staff incrementally increase through those on an annual basis until they reach the top of the grade. There's a cost of borrowing that we have to incur as a result of some borrowing that we've made previously to fund what will be a fantastic custody and investigation block at headquarters in Kempston. And there are national and regional contracts that are imposed on us as a single force. So the actual amount of growth that the force will actually benefit from in terms of being able to supplement its current level of service through your £10 precept, if that's what you choose to do, is quite small against that £8.6 million worth of funding. But it is crucial in terms of efficiency, effectiveness, and a better service to our public. Now, they are linked to human resources increase, professional standards increase, and supervision, with the latter assisting the officer retention drive that you have squarely put into your police and crime plan. The efficiency of the organisation will be through an investment in ICT, where we look to modernise our processes, transform some of the work we're doing, and we see a lot of that work going into our force control room, which will make the contact with the public a lot more seamless and more efficient. And we also see an increase in resources going into our regional policing capability to deal with drugs and serious and organised crime, and continuing to provide a higher level of service than we can afford around investigation staff and victim engaging staff, which provides a better service to those victims, particularly around serious sexual offences. So in terms of what the public will see differently, if you choose to increase £10 on your council tax, we will see an increase of 72 officers into the force. We'll see 4 of those into our regional capability around serious and organised crime, 18 of those into our force control room to enhance the service that the public receive from our force control room, 4 into rural policing, which will be centred around our central Bedfordshire area and providing that enhanced rural policing service. As I've mentioned, human resources training, professional standards, supervision in terms of making sure that with that young workforce we have, that we've got the right level of supervision to ensure that we retain the people that we recruit and also enhance our capability. And the remaining officers will be split across our response and crime functions. So in essence, there are a number of areas around victim engagement, regional crime capability, force control room, investment into your own office, and a way of funding capital expenditure in the past that we think fits squarely into your police and crime plan, which is based on what the public have been asking you to provide. And we also see it in key areas around public contact and investigation, which are areas that we've identified as part of our inspection process of areas that we think will need some improvement or investment in. I think it's worth highlighting that as part of the settlement, we did get an indication of what the next 2-year funding may look like. And in 23-24 and 24-25, the government have indicated that it will further increase general police funding by 100 million in the first year and 150 million in the second year. Our estimate of what we would get from that is 0.9 million in the first year and 1.4 million in the second year. But it is worth highlighting that the cost of officers increase in the first year, we expect to be around 2.5 million compared to that 0.9 million increase in funding. So recognising some of those pressures on police pay and recognising some of those additional funding aspects, we envisage that in 23-24, we will have a small gap of around £0.9 million, and in 24-25, £0.6 million. But that is before we've identified any savings or any areas of efficiency. And we do have, as you as a commissioner have built up over a number of years a budget reserve that we could also use to bridge those gaps if we were required to do so. It's worth just highlighting that in terms of future years, quite a bit can change before we get to that position. We know that pay awards can change. We've seen that over the pandemic period, and we know that we're coming into an area where inflation is very high, so pay awards could change. And we know that both you and the chief have been lobbying for a change in the funding formula, and the government have said that they will revise that funding formula over that medium-term period, which could hopefully mean additional funding coming to Bedfordshire Police, but it could also mean a reduction in funding coming to Bedfordshire Police. So a lot can change over the medium term, but hopefully, Commissioner, I've highlighted the need for an increase in precept to the maximum £10 in 22-23, hopefully highlighted to you what the force will provide towards delivering your police and crime plan from the increase, but also highlighted some of the challenges that the force perceive it will have over the next 2 or 3 years after setting this budget, albeit recognising that things can change between now and then. And I'll happily take any questions, Chair.
Thank you very much, Phil, for that report. And on behalf of all of our residents, I also want to thank the finance team in Bedfordshire Police for the fantastic work and hours they've put into this, and also to Gavin as well, who is in the meeting, for the work, the way you guys have all worked together as a team to put together a financial picture that actually demonstrates what is needed in our police force, and also the gaps that exist in making the business case effectively for the £10 precept increase to deliver on the police and crime plan that the people want to see delivered in Bedfordshire. If I can just drill down a little bit into the PSD and the professional standards department side of things. Obviously, it's been very topical at the moment around some of the really tragic cases that's involved police officers and inappropriate behaviours. And of course, here in Bedfordshire, last year, there have been 1 or 2 officers that were dismissed for their practices. Can you just explain, what potential impact this investment into PSD will have, and how it will help to reassure residents that you as a leadership team are taking the issue of confidence in police officers very seriously?
So, yeah. Commissioner, I'll perhaps start and bring the DEP and Phil in. Obviously, we have very, very high standards of behaviour that we set for our officers and staff, and we deal very robustly with anybody that departs from those standards in a way that would concern both yourself, the public, and myself. So it's important that we've got the right level of investment that enables us to maintain those standards. What we've seen, of course, with the increase in 20,000 officers across the UK from the government funding is an overall increase in officers across our collaborated force for both Beds, Cams and Herts, and we have a collaborated function professional standards. That actually covers quite a significant number of individuals when you put into it the Joint Protective Services and all the collaborative functions, as well as the individual forces, and they haven't had an equivalent investment to match the uplift from 20,000 officers, which presents some challenges in terms of our ability to maintain those standards, but also ensure that we're guarding against corruption threats as well. So hence that's the purpose for this investment, and I'll pause and bring Trevor and Phil in if they want to add anything to that. The only thing I would add, Commissioner, is we've got whilst it's a collaborated command, that's a good thing, because it means from the economy of scale that we get, we were able to have quite specialist resource in there, not just professional standards, but anti-corruption capability. And clearly the uplift does present a risk, despite all of our vetting processes and standards, that we bring someone into the organisation that seeks to infiltrate the organisation, or then chooses not to exhibit the behaviours and values we would expect. So therefore, that capability is really important, and it does provide me with a briefing every month on any cases that exist in our force. And I can assure you that we have a very kind of high bar and high standard approach to that. And I'm, hopefully I'm very satisfied and reassured that that's giving the service that the force requires. But it does need that investment because the size of the workforce is growing and it needs to be commensurate to that.
And again, before you come in, Phil, I guess for me, it's not just about the public, as such, having that confidence, and that's absolutely critical. But within the force, are you satisfied with the systems you've got in place internally to encourage any officers who's got concerns to be able to speak up and know that they will be heard?
Yeah, so we have a number of ways that officers can come forward, to report any behaviour of any colleague they're not satisfied with. But clearly, our aim is for strong leadership, within the organisation at first and second line manager level that identifies any kind of behaviour that might be of concern early and addresses it, rather than allowing it to escalate into an issue that then needs a professional standards department to come in and scrutinise. We'll always need that capability, but we also need, with a young workforce, high standard of leadership, which links to why in Phil's update he mentioned the increase in supervision.
Right, and actually kind of linked into that, and you talked about the senior management and the middle management. I mean, what is the force doing to try and embed that culture? Is there any training that's ongoing? How is that, if there is one, how is that going so far?
So from previous meetings, Commissioner, we've done a huge amount of work on culture over the last 18 months, and we've, following the launch of that some time ago, we followed that up with both senior leadership days, where we spent days with the executive, spent days with the senior leadership to reinforce the messages around culture. We've now started the first and second line supervisors executive sessions as well, to do that with them as well, and make sure that they are fully sighted on what we're seeking to do with the culture of the organisation, and they're aware of all of the mechanisms that are in place, such as Bluebell to support reporting, and make sure that people who are courageous and stand up and identify issues won't be victimised and can have confidence that they'll be supported appropriately, and all of those things, so people are aware of all of those things. So that's an ongoing programme that the whole culture piece will continue, and it's not time limited, it won't end. It's something that we will continually reinforce over and over again, but that is being delivered at this moment in time. We did 2 workshops yesterday and another 4 to come over the coming weeks.
Is attendance compulsory?
Yes, it is, for sergeants, inspectors and first and second line police staff managers.
Okay, great. I mean, it'll be really good to get an update on how this is going within the force at a subsequent delivery board meeting. Phil, did you want to come in around that?
No, I think you covered everything.
Okay. Also, on the obviously there's the 72 officers that we're going to be, the plan is to get in place with this £10 uplift. Could you give an indication of when we can start expecting to have some of these in place during the year?
Yep, no problem. So I caveat what I say with what we see in policing. It's a volatile organisation. It's a volatile business. So I caveat it with the ability for us to be able to deploy resources where they're needed. However, in terms of the 72, they will be spread over the financial year, but we'll have employed all of those 72 by the end of this financial year. That is 22-23. We will look to ensure that the extra that are going into the force control room, the extra that are going into rural policing, and the extra that are going into our supervision will be in by the 30th of September, and then the rest will be phased in over the duration of the financial year. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And in terms, I know that some people would ask, well, look, how will this increase the level of police presence in my area? And as I mentioned in the previous meeting, there have been some elected representatives who have queried what this actually means for their constituency or for their own ward. Is it just worthwhile clarifying, Trevor, Gary, and Sean, that the numbers we're looking at here are spread across functions rather than geographical areas as such?
Yeah, what we don't do is we don't specify particular levels of policing across geographic areas, because that's not particularly helpful in terms of crime prevention or targeting demand, etc. But the resources that are allocated to us will be allocated across and apportioned on the basis of demand and need and the professional judgment in terms of where we deem they're most appropriate to be deployed. And they will be allocated in a way which provides benefit and impact to all of the areas that we cover in geographic terms. But it is functionally apportioned rather than geographically. Right.
Okay. And just going to talk about the force control room, which you mentioned. What is the latest on, I mean, just the trend, some of call volumes and things like that in the force control room? How are we doing at the moment?
Do you want me to take that one, Chief?
Yeah, go on, Sean.
Commissioner, one of our fundamental responsibilities is to protect our public. And what we have to prioritise in that is to take emergency calls and then be able to respond to those in immediate need. And we've been aware that we have got some challenges within the force control room. And as a result of that, for the last 3 months, we've had a dedicated response to that under the direct line of sight of chief officer level. And we focused on 2 key areas, and that's processes and people. People in terms of supporting those already working in a really tough environment, not just because of the nature of some of those calls that they receive, but because of the volume. And well-being of that staff has been paramount for us. The second is investment in further resources. Since that time, we've had a cohort of 5 people join the control room, and we've got another cohort of 5 starting their training within the next 2 weeks. In terms of processes, we've looked at how to sharpen up our internal processes, but also make subtle changes to the way the public can contact us and that journey for them. And what I can say is over those last 3 months, we have made month-on-month progress in shortening the time that it takes for people to contact us, for us to deal with those calls, and then to respond to those emergency situations.
Right. And again, still on the force control room, with this different avenues and ways of making contact easier, do you think that's also driving up call volumes? Or is it just a case of there's just more crime taking place?
No, we haven't seen call volumes increase disproportionately. What we have seen is people take advantage of different ways in which they can contact the police.
Right. Okay. And the IVR, is IVR you call it, the voice recordings? Right. How's that influencing things so far? Since it's quite a new addition to the control room.
Yeah, as I said, we've seen month-on-month improvement in terms of that service to the public from both October and November. That was significant in December when we brought in the new IVR system. It means that individuals are getting a more bespoke service, but also allows us to prioritise better those that call 101, because it's not just a difference between 101 and 999. There may well be people who have used 101, not certain of the way that they should contact policing. So we can prioritise those that are in need of immediate help.
Okay, thanks for that, Sean. Just lastly, on your bit, Phil, around the victim engagement officers, do we have a number of how many will be going to that unit from the 72?
Yeah, so they're police staff rather than police officers.
Yes, right.
And in terms of investigation and victim engagement officers, that'll be an additional 8 to what we have budget for. So some of those will already enrol, Commissioner, and this funding allows us those to continue rather than our service drop off by not being able to afford them any further.
So what do they actually do? Do you mind explaining just that for the benefit of listeners? What do the victim engagement officers do?
Yeah, I'll let Sean most probably do that, might be better.
Yeah, victim engagement officers, Commissioner, as it says on the tin, they are there to support and provide a bespoke service to victims of crime who require that service. For example, rape, serious sexual offences and domestic abuse. Our officers will carry a workload whereby they need to and deal with a number of different victims, but we prioritise these victims as the most vulnerable, so they will get a bespoke service from dedicated victim engagement officers.
Right, brilliant. Well, yes.
It's worth just touching on that briefly in the context of COVID and where we find ourselves with the pressure on our court systems. So we know there's a backlog through the court systems which weren't sitting throughout COVID in a normal way, and that means that the trial dates have been pushed back, and offenders will be on bail for longer periods of time, having been charged awaiting their appearance at court, which can then translate into pressure on victims. And there is a risk for us in trial processes that victims become disengaged and lose interest in something that's prolonged for a unnecessarily long period of time in some cases. So the victim engagement role becomes increasingly important in making sure that we can maintain a good level of contact with the victims, have an ongoing understanding of any concerns that they've got, and most importantly, address them in a way which keeps them engaged with the trial process and ultimately gives us the best possible chance of a successful conclusion at court.
So at least the hope is that if we are able to get the funding increase through the precepts, for example, and we're able to get this added resource into the victim engagement team, we should be able to at least maintain the level of activity and performance, if not improve it. That would at least maintain it.
Yeah, that would be my hope. Yeah.
Okay. Trevor?
Commissioner, it's just to emphasise and clarify, given it's a public meeting, I think it's been said clearly, but I just wanted to, be sure that the public are aware that these are not the staff that are in your victim care services. These are specialist officers working alongside investigators in the teams that Sian describes, who are offering a real sort of high level of service to individuals with particular vulnerabilities because of the trauma of the crimes they've experienced.
Okay, that's brilliant. Well, thank you very much for your contribution to that agenda item. So I think we move on to number 13, which is issues raised to me by members of the public. And just to explain this to everyone who was watching, occasionally during my, well, not occasionally, almost pretty much every time that I'm out and about at meetings, at engagements with the public, there is a plethora of questions that are raised with me by residents, businesses, and they want to have answers. And whilst I try to get answers to them as quickly as I can, I think it's worthwhile putting some of these questions in the public domain, where I can put this directly to senior officers in Bedfordshire Police for a more formal response. So one of these is around burglaries. What is the force doing to actively bring down the case of residential burglaries in the county and acquisitive crimes generally? I mean, I know there have been some positive news recently. Can you just explain what the force are doing and what more is being done to try and get this down even further?
Yep, Commissioner, in how we tackle neighbourhood crime and in particular burglary residential, we have a dedicated team that focus solely on burglary residential, and they're involved in not just the investigation, but they work closely with our community teams to help deliver crime prevention, as we've talked about already, and our dedicated design out crime officers within that community function. What I can say is that in relation to residential burglary, we've had 368 fewer victims of that crime this year than we had last year. And we've also seen good improvement in terms of our outcomes. So burglary residential is a priority for us, as are all neighbourhood crimes. We seek to tackle it on two fronts. One is preventing victims. That's first and foremost important to us. And then when we do have victims, it's ensuring that they are supported through your commission services and the officer themselves. But then we do everything we can in terms of that dedicated investigation to make sure that those responsible are dealt with and brought to justice. That takes another step, because as part of the judicial process, we have got measures in place and orders that we can take advantage of that help manage those perpetrators going through their cycle of offending.
No, I take it that we are one of the trial pilot areas for the tagging for persistent burglars or those who are serving. Is it a 12-month sentence for the tagging, the Home Office tagging scheme? What are the figures on that one at the moment? Do you know how we're performing with the tagging?
Yeah, there's two types of tagging. There's one in which Bedfordshire volunteered for and was selected to be part of a pilot scheme with some high-tech electronic monitoring systems. And this is really focused on serious acquisitive crime. And we've got 16 people on that programme. And they are monitored each and every day. There's a balance in terms of the good news, because one offender has been dealt with positively from that scheme. But what that's also showing us is that those other 15 have not offended whilst they've been on this scheme. The second part of that system is a voluntary approach by perpetrators themselves who seek to rehabilitate. And as part of a community order, they can go on to what's called a buddy tag. And we've got 4 people on that tagging system as present. And again, we've not seen any offending from that cohort.
So basically, out of 20, potentially only one has reoffended, and he was caught.
Yes.
And was that directly because of the tags that he was wearing?
Yes.
Right. Can't we just get all of them on a tag?
I think we may get some opposition to that.
Right. Okay. No, that's quite an impressive outcome. And also another question I wanted to that gets asked about this all the time is around how well the force is protecting victims of domestic abuse. I mean, this is an awful crime. It's a real problem. And so, how well do you feel that the force is performing in preventing victims from further harm?
For our victims of such offences, this isn't an issue that we alone can address. This is very much a county-wide full partnership approach, and we all play a huge part within that. So, for example, within the investigation of these offences, that does sit within policing, and we've got a dedicated response under our Emerald team. But in order to service and support those victims, there's a plethora of support agencies that help them. Not only the officer in the case, and as we've already talked about, the victim engagement officers that are dedicated to victims of domestic abuse, but we also have independent domestic violence advisors that come through local victim services. And it's to ensure that these individuals who are vulnerable by sheer nature of what they've suffered are supported throughout the whole journey of their being from a victim of crime through to the judicial process. We have every inspector, as part of the Emerald investigation, will reach out and make 4 personal victim contacts themselves every month. We also have an internal scrutiny panel, which does have members of our partnership present to make sure that the services that each victim is getting is fair and professional. And then we also have a victim and witness engagement board, whereby we predominantly focus on the care and safety and the support victims are getting, and that in turn feeds into the wider criminal justice board. Further to that, we have dedicated schemes under the management of domestic abuse perpetrators that target and focus on perpetrators themselves, and we have got mechanisms under integrated offender management whereby we can adopt similar processes to offender management with what we call a free cohort. So people who aren't on any orders, but can be adopted with that dedicated presence and focus.
Well, just 2 things I wanted to ask as a follow-on to that. Do you feel, though, that we've got, or not we, do you feel like you have got the level of resource that you need to deal with the volume of this issue in our communities?
We always need. I'll come in before Sean says.
Oh, yeah, that was a bad question because I know exactly what you're going to say. Don't
I know where I'm going.
Yes.
We always need more resource, and despite the uplift program, despite the growth we've had, despite the support we've had from Precept, from the previous commissioner, and that we would hope and anticipate from yourself, and indeed we're waiting on. We know that as a result of the funding formula, we're still significantly disadvantaged. And we need resources over and above those that we've already received to be able to meet the demand across all the areas that we'd want to. That said, we have made significant investments in key areas of the business, and Emerald and rape and serious sexual offences is one of those. But would I like more resource? Very definitely. Do we need it? Yes, we do.
All right. Okay. Well, let's keep working at this, and I'll keep doing whatever I can to try and help in that regard. And just lastly, on the DA and sexual violence issue, I mean, how is the force performing in terms of charge rates for rape and sexual violence? I know that used to be in the bottom quartile some time ago. What is the movement in that area at the moment?
Two parts of that, Commissioner. One is reporting and recorded crimes, and these have gone up. We are 8th nationally in terms of recording rape and serious sexual offences. But that's a good news story because our communities and individuals have that trust and confidence in reporting to policing. But our target, where we focus our attention, is on that investigation and that dedicated service to victims of this type of offence. And again, we sit 6th nationally in terms of our outcome solved rate. And that's not just in terms of what we're pushing through, but then we have an excellent relationship between our RASO team and dedicated lawyers within the CPS to make sure that we have that full turnaround through the judicial system. And that's working really well, to the extent that we get visitors from across the country to come and ask us what we do, how we do it, and how they can take some of that practice.
Can you just spell out what RASO means for the benefit of those who do not know what RASO would mean?
Rape and serious sexual offences.
So you say we're now 6th. Where did the force used to be?
We were in double figures, and again, when you say where we were, it's a journey. What we've done over the last year plus is make steady, regular improvement in terms of our outcomes. And now we're seeing that we are 6th nationally, and we've been there for a few months now. So that's consistent improvement. So,
and does the force have any plans or ambitions to be better than 6th? If it's not so much about positioning, but you know what I mean, is to improve this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really interested in league table positions. What I'm interested in is delivering the best possible service we can to the victims. So yeah, we'll be looking to maintain at least the service that we've got. If we can make improvements with the resource levels that are available to us, then absolutely we'll do so. But the focus will, for me, never be on a binary, simplistic comparison on league tables. I'm not interested in that.
Okay, and I agree. I'm more interested in the quality of output than position on LinkedIn. But I agree with you. Just two other things that I want to just touch on in terms of the question that I've had. So Trevor, you had your hand up.
Yeah, the other bit I wanted to add, Commissioner, is we discussed it last time, is make that link not just our focus on the investigation and how we're doing with that, but also on our whole agenda of male violence against women and girls and how we are being very perpetrator focused, very much going on the front foot with the aim of seeking out those offenders before we end up with more victims, and also working with offenders to ensure that they don't continue to offend. Yeah.
And I'm actually building on that. Do we have a problem profile for domestic abuse or homicides or some of the very serious high risk and high harm crimes that we have in the county? Is there a problem profile of some kind for that?
We have a range of problem. I'll let Sian answer that in detail. I don't think we've currently got one for male violence against women and girls or domestic abuse at this moment in time. We have limited analytical capability, and it's one of those areas that we have to prioritise on the basis of greatest risk and harm. So there is work in progress towards the domestic abuse problem profile, but it's one that we have had previously, but it's not up to date, to be fair, and that's in the programme of work for our analytical capability, which we're seeking to enhance.
I think that would be something that's probably worth looking at. We can have a discussion about this offline. That's fine, but I think this is something that I'll be very, very keen for the force to have in place, because I think that could potentially inform our prevention focus and perpetrator focus as well, if we can just have that profile in place. Sean, do you want to come in of a more detailed point, and I'll come to you, Trevor?
The only bit I'll add there, Commissioner, is just that we work with our 3 CSPs to understand what the issues are. When we talk about a problem profile, it's not just about the crime itself, it's about the impact on victims, the community. So we work with our 3 local authorities to make sure we've got the right product, so that we can then collectively all contribute to making it a safer place.
Right, okay, thanks. Trevor?
And Commissioner, just to add to that, obviously we are very focused on repeat offenders and being proactive in terms of Clare's Law, and also we are looking to expand our kind of drug testing on arrest from not just being serious to acquisitive offenders, but into perpetrators of domestic violence. So there's a number of things we're doing in terms of having oversight of the problem and the big picture, if you like, in terms of tackling it and seeking to drive that down in the county.
Right. Yeah. Thanks for those responses. Just one other thing that has been a common theme in some of the engagement I've had with the public around roads traffic issues. I know that unfortunately we've had quite a number of reports of antisocial behaviour caused by motorists. And I noticed that on the report, on the paper that was sent, that was produced for the other part of our meeting. And also there's been, I believe there's been quite a number of cases of road fatalities of late. What is the force doing in terms of trying to keep our roads safer? I've seen some reports of community officers taking vehicles off the road, people driving without insurance or MOT, and things like that. I mean, what more can be done to try and keep our roads safer? Trevor.
Maybe if I come in with what our kind of joint protective services are doing, and then Sean might have something on the neighbourhood policing side. But clearly, just on that latter point, if that's a priority of local residents in the priority setting, then the community teams will include that in their activity, and they do. And our special constabulary gets involved in that at a local level as well, and they've got equipment that they can use and be trained in. But what I would just say in terms of the context, our roads policing teams, I'm conscious there's a recent documentary in relation to that. What we've not done in across our collaborated command is reduce resources in that space. So we still put out 14 officers every day across Bedfordshire, Cambridgeshire and Hertfordshire, a specialist roads policing capability. They responded in the last quarter to nearly 4,500 separate incidents and made 378 arrests as a capability themselves. So they are being very proactive on the roads. You're right in saying that we have had a run of high level of road traffic collisions, serious and fatal collisions. You could appreciate that in itself is a serious investigation that takes specialist trained officers, and actually the attendance at those scenes, is terrible for victims and families, but also pretty traumatic for the officers that go from one and then to the next and investigate those. So we are kind of looking at that in great detail to see what those trends are and if there's risk areas that we can prioritise with partners. But at the moment, it seems to be a general volume of overall increase of those type, and indeed we had a fatal collision in Bedfordshire this week. But we are being proactive. So we recently run an operation with Highways where we used a specialist asset that allows us to look into vehicles and see users of mobile phones whilst they're using their vehicles, and that roads policing capability. I just described work closely with that capability in the county to identify offenders who are taking, or individuals who are taking those kind of risks on the roads, to seek to reduce the risk that leads to those kind of serious incidents.
Thanks, Trevor. Sean, did you want to come in before Gary comes in?
To reinforce how we do work with our local communities, because people may well have heard of Speedwatch, but the actual full title is Community Speedwatch, whereby we work with all those great volunteers within our community to help tackle localised problems. And again, we're always recruiting for more. There's information available on our website in terms of how we can set up Speedwatch programs and how people can volunteer for those services.
Thanks for that, Sean. Gary?
I just wanted to mention briefly, because in the, whilst we're all talking about numbers and activity and arrests and all of that good stuff that we're doing, of course, behind every fatality is a devastated family and a community who've lost a loved one. So I just wanted to mention the fantastic work that's done by the Road Victims Trust as well, which obviously is a service funded by yourself, and they do a genuinely superb job for those bereaved families who've lost loved ones in the most tragic of circumstances on the roads as well, because that's a really important service that is done to a very high standard here in Bedfordshire.
I fully join you in that commendation of the work that they do. I had a meeting with them sometime last year, and quite frankly, the difference that they make is quite remarkable, as well as the officers that also work with them. Yes, that is the last bit of the question I wanted to ask in terms of issues raised by the public. Next, so agenda item number 14, item for February. We're going to be going through a thematic approach again for that one. So this month was mostly the budget. So next one will be around offender management. So that is something. Oh no, that one moved to February. Yes, that's going to be in February. That's right. But the other details will be published later on. But that will be the end of the meeting. And thank you all for your contributions and for all the work that you do. And to all of our officers and staff who are watching this, I wanted to just thank you all for the excellent job that you do. And you continue to make Bedfordshire a much safer place. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Commissioner.
Thank you.
All right.